it's kind of like she's saying, this is a dangerous situation. I'm aware of that, but it's happening as I'm writing it. Like, it's happening. It's a dangerous situation, and it's happening. Like, she doesn't pull any punches for you. She doesn't say it's gonna be okay, or guys, this is where it gets bad. Brace yourself. Like, she was just all. So you never knew. You're like, but what's gonna happen, Cheryl? Your only solution was to keep going forward and to read. So I think that made the book stick in my mind a lot more. What kind of woman are you? Frank asked when he was done with his work and he'd climb into the truck beside me. What kind? I asked. Our eyes locked and something in his unveiled itself, and I looked away. Are you like Jane? Like the kind of woman Tarzan would like? I guess so, I said, and laughed, though I felt the creeping anxiety, wishing that Frank would start the truck and drive. He was a big man, rangy and chiseled and tan, a miner who looked to me like a cowboy. His hands reminded me of all the hands of the men I'd known growing up, men who worked their bodies for a living, men whose hands would never get clean no matter how hard they scrubbed. As I sat there with him, I felt the way I always do when alone in certain circumstances, with certain men, that anything could happen, that he could go about his business, mannerly and kind, or he could grab me and change the course of things entirely in an instant. With Frank in his truck, I watched his hands, his every move, each cell in my body on high alert, though I appeared as relaxed as if I'd just woken from a nap. I've got a little something for us, he said, reaching into the glove compartment to remove the flask of whiskey. It's my reward for a hard day's work. He unscrewed the cap and handed it to me. Ladies first. I took it from him and held it to my lips and let the whiskey wash into my mouth. Yep, that's the kind of woman you are. That's what I'm going to call you, Jane. He took the flask from me and had a long drink. You know I'm not actually out here completely alone, I blurted, making up the lie as I spoke. My husband, his name is Paul, he's also hiking. He started at Kennedy Meadows. Do you know where that is? We each wanted the experience of hiking alone, so he's hiking south and I'm hiking north and we're meeting in the middle, and then we'll go the rest of the summer together. Frank nodded and took another sip from the flask. Well, then he's crazier than you, he said, after thinking about it for a while. It's one thing to be a woman crazy enough to do what you're doing, another thing to be a man letting his own wife go off and do this. Yeah, I said, as if I agreed with him. So anyway, we'll be reunited in a few days. I said it with such conviction that I felt convinced of it myself, that Paul that very minute was making his way toward me, that in fact we hadn't filed for divorce 2 months before on a snowy day in April, that he was coming for me, or that he would know if I didn't make it any further down the trail, that my disappearance would be noted in a matter of days. But the opposite was true. The people in my life were like the band-aids that had blown away in the desert wind that first day on the trail. They scattered and then they were gone. No one expected me to even so much as call when I reached my first stop, or the second or third. Frank leaned back against his seat and adjusted his big metal belt buckle. There's something else I like to reward myself with after a hard day's work, he said. What's that? I asked, with a tentative smile, my heart hammering in my chest. My hands on my lap felt tingly. I was acutely aware of my backpack, too far away in the bed of the truck. In a flash, I decided I'd leave it behind if I had to push the truck door open and run. Frank reached under the seat where the gun resided in its little black case. He came up with a clear plastic bag. Inside, there were long, thin ropes of red licorice, each bunch wound like a lasso. He held the bag out to me and asked, You want some, Miss Jane? My biggest experience with the book was how I found myself both harshly judging Cheryl and also really, really empathizing with her. I found that I really had this strong desire to relate to everything that she did because I saw myself in her as a 20-something young female writer who also lost her mother, albeit for me, at a younger age. So I felt like I put her to a standard that I usually put myself, which is pretty strict. So when she did stupid things like cheat on her husband or try heroin, and I say stupid in scare quotes, I felt really, really angry at her, and that feeling followed me even as I saw her preparing for the PCT in a way that meant that she wasn't prepared at all. And it took me a while to realize that why I was so angry at her and why I was so worried for her was because she was my reflection in the book. She was going through this journey, a pilgrimage I've never made before, for her mom and for her life after her mom's death. I was like this weird little neurotic angel on her shoulder, I felt like, where I was telling her to do none of the things that she did that ultimately led her to the catharsis of accepting where her life is and where her life is going to be. I could never forget that was who she was ultimately. She was Cheryl, she was Bobby's daughter, she had a stepdad that wasn't there, she was sister to Leaf, but ultimately for me, she was a woman alone in the wilderness.